squirm when you get introduced like that? Sit in your chair and feel kind of uncomfortable, but thank you very much for that great introduction. And I have to say that I'm humbled and I'm honored to be here with all of you. It's incredible to think about this conference and the nature of it being something that only Penn Staters can come to, and yet you can fill a space this large. It really shows a kind of commitment to teaching and learning with technology that I think is really impressive. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. For those of you who have your laptops or iPhones or other device, this is the hashtag that we're using on Twitter today. If you do have questions or comments you'd like to make, you can use the tag in Twitter to tweet those thoughts, and we have a separate laptop set up here that I'll be checking periodically it's refreshing itself so I can see the things you're saying, kind of an informal back channel, and will help me maybe be a little more responsive during the keynote to the things you're thinking about. So I want to begin by telling this story. I think you're always supposed to begin with a story or a joke. We'll start with a story today. This is the polo parable about the move to teaching and learning online. Once upon a time, there was a water polo team at a university that did very well. They'd won conference 3 years in a row. And one morning, the AD of the university walked into the coach's office and said, "Coach, we're so proud of you. Your team's the pride of the school. You know as well as we do you're the only team that really does anything here." Not Penn State, obviously. Right? Said, "You're the pride of the school, and I have this incredible opportunity for you to really do something new and innovative. It turns out next year in the conference that there's a new kind of polo that's going to be played here. And with the defensive strategies and the offense that you have and the recruiting and all your experience, I'm sure that if we take you off of water polo and put you coaching this new polo team, that you'll do just as well, and we can win conference the very first year. So, just take your playbook and get ready for this new opportunity. Thanks for your commitment to the university," and the AD leaves. Now, the idea that you could run the same plays on the backs of horses that you could in the pool with any measure of success is sort of ludicrous. And as we think about moving our teaching online, it's sort of like saying that we're swimming on horseback. In other words, to think that you can do the same things online that you can do in the classroom is just ludicrous. It's a different kind of space. It has different affordances, different opportunities, different pitfalls. And even though at a high level it is about scoring points and playing defense at a very, very high level, below that, the individual tactics and strategies and things you might try to do would probably want to be very different on the backs of horses than they would in the pool. So just having said that, you want to use that story just to frame the conversation today, but things really change very quickly. So if you've seen this video, did you know, then you know what this next slide says. But in terms of the country that's the richest in the world with the largest military and the strongest education system, etc., the answer to the implied question here is Great Britain, of course. Just 100 years ago. And things do change very, very rapidly. Galadriel said in Lord of the Rings that the world has changed. But it's actually worse than her statement. It's changing all the time. And the pace of change, the rate of change, seems to be increasing significantly. I want to talk about 6 kinds of specific changes. First, the change from things being analog to being digital, and this one should be fairly straightforward to understand. Most of us don't get our music on vinyl anymore. We get it in digital format, either on CDs or by MP3 downloads. TV, of course, almost transitioned completely to digital in February. I suppose that's going to happen in June now. Our phone service, the way we read newspapers, the movies that we get on DVD instead of VHS. Things are moving or have moved from being analog to being digital. Things are changing from being tethered to being mobile. So I don't have to have my phone plugged into the wall anymore to use it. I'm not connected to the wall that way. I don't have to have my computer plugged in to be on the internet or even to be powered for that matter. And I don't have to show up in the office every day to work either. And things are changing from being isolated to being much more connected. And I think there's a whole semester course here that maybe we have to think about at some point. But if you think about all the kinds of different connections between people, whether it's by email, by instant message, by Skype, or however, the way that content is all connected to one another, hyperlinks being the definitive feature of the web, which is a way of connecting some content to other content. And then the way that systems are connected to one another and that they talk to each other. And then the way that content is connected to systems, and systems are connected to people, and people are connected to content. This massive interconnection is really a defining feature of our time. A change from things being generic to things being personal. So when you go to buy a car, or when you go to buy a computer, particularly in the case of a computer, you don't walk into the store and pick a computer up off the shelf. You go onto a website and say, I want my monitor to be this big, and I want this much RAM, and I want this kind of hard drive, and I want this version of the operating system. You want it to be just the way that you want it to be. And you want your car, if you're going to buy a car, you may as well get the color you want. And if your phones were to go off, we would hear different ringtones on every phone in the room, because we want things to be ours. We want them to be personal to us. And there's been a big change from a culture of really consuming media primarily to one where we're all much more involved in producing media. Whether that's instead of only listening to the radio, also podcasting, or instead of just reading the news, also blogging, or creating videos and uploading those to YouTube. We've become a culture that's much more participatory and that invites creation in a way that is different from before. And then finally, a change from things being closed to things being open, both in terms of software, so you think of Linux in addition to something like Microsoft Windows, or in terms of applications, something like OpenOffice compared to Microsoft Office, and data, all kinds of GIS data, weather data that's openly available to us, data from NASA, and then content as well, available on the web in a very open way. So if we lay these things all out side by side and look at the way things kind of worked then and the way that they do work now, or the way they're increasing to work now, the really disappointing thing about this slide is that you can easily here and still have a pretty effective description, pretty accurate description
of what it is that we're all doing. And to me, I think this idea, not the digital divide where people have computers and people don't, but the daily divide, the way that education is so different from the rest of our lives, in particular our students' lives, is a problem for us. You know, they come expecting a certain kind of experience based on the experience that they have with government and with business and with other things in their life. And then they get to school, and school is so different. In his new book, Remix, Larry Lessig gives a great example about the bookification of TV. And I think Lessig was your keynote speaker here last year, or maybe just the year before. If you haven't had a chance to read Remix, I would highly recommend it to you. But the idea about the bookification of TV is, imagine going into the library, and as you walk into the library, you ask to be pointed towards science fiction, and they say, I'm sorry, science fiction's only open from 7:30 to 8. It's do-it-yourself right now. The do-it-yourself books are available right now if you'd like to look at them. You have to come back at 7:30 if you want science fiction. You would just, the faces you're making at me are the right faces. It's just a ridiculous idea, right? If you talk to young people today about television and tell them, did you know there was a time that if you wanted to watch Lost, you actually had to be in front of your television at 9 o'clock, or you missed it? It would seem just as ridiculous as the idea that you had to be at the library at a certain time to use certain types of books. So things like TiVo, things like Hulu, really bookify television programs and make them so that they're available to us whenever we want them. The obvious application to us here is this idea of probably bookifying courses. And an online course, it's online, so it's sort of bookified already. It's not really a challenge to talk to you about that, but I do want you to think about bookifying our online courses. Our on-campus courses. Why do I have to be in a certain room from 10:30 to 11:30 to hear you broadcast your lecture? And if you've been watching Inside Higher Ed and Campus Technology in some of these magazines, lately you'll be seeing an increasing trend of people reporting on experiments where they bring some of their students to class, and other sections they disallow from coming to class, and they give them podcasts of the lecture and say, stay home and listen to this podcast. And then what they find later on when they test them on the material covered either in class or covered on the podcast is that the kids who sat back